And this is why you should always pay attention to movies. Polly P works here. So while recording a episode of our podcast, the Rose Skull Podcast, my co-host Reddit Sephiroth and I were talking about some One Piece things. And talking about some One Piece things, a very interesting memory popped back into my head. Do you remember the fourth One Piece movie? The movie entitled Dead End Adventure. This movie came out in 2003 on March 1st. So over 20 years ago. Do you feel old yet? Oh boy. But yeah, I first saw this back in, I'd say, 2007, 2008, back when YouTube was a bit of the Wild West and you could just post anything and it wouldn't be taken down for copyright. So yeah, I saw it back then, and what was so interesting about it, looking back at it now, is that during that movie, the Straw Hats take part in this race called the Dead End Race, right? It's basically just like a wacky racist speed racer type race with several pirate crews sailing their boats to a location for 300 million berries. During that movie, something very interesting happens. Robin saves the Mary from crashing. She does this in a very interesting way. What she does is that she spawns hand after hand on top of one another, creating several hundred hands that come together to make one big hand. And using that big hand, she's able to toss the Mary back into the water and therefore back to the race. What is so interesting about this is that back in 2003, this was the moment that kind of cemented the rest of Robin's moveset for the rest of the series in canon, because what happens then afterward is that during Thriller Bark, we see that she could do a very similar technique. She uses a bunch of hands to make wings so she can fly. This is then built upon again later during the Oars fight, in which she makes a bunch of hands that create sort of like a big mitten that's able to hold Oars' hand behind his back. What's so interesting about this is that all of these abilities have root in an event that happened in that movie. It is then built upon again during the time skip on the route to Fishman Island, in which she makes giant hands on the side of the Sunny in order to propel it off a rock to keep it from crashing. This is also the first time that she used the Fishman Karate. Later, during both Dressrosa and Wano, we see yet another expression of this technique, because she uses a giant tree technique called Flower Umbrella in order to guard Rebecca during the Diamante fight. What's so interesting then, during her most recent fights in Wano, is that she makes a big human in the form of Gigant Flower, or Giant Flower, and that giant human is of herself, of course. And then this is expounded upon when she uses a Dimano Fluru, and she uses this technique to then crush Black Maria. But based on the size of both of these giant forms, she can only make a full body that's the size of a big human. But she can make giant limbs, apparently the size of a giant. And now we see that from that movie up till now, her manifestation technique has improved. Because even, say, with wings and such that she did in the pre-time skip, these constructs are full constructs. They're flesh, they're solid. You can see no separation of hands when they are manifested, unlike, say, the wings or the giant hands she made in the movie, or the giant hands she used against Oars, which means that this is an actual power-up, a power-up that we were alluded to again in a movie. This also gives context to how she can make wings and horns appear on her demon transformation, because those are just well crafted and well laced together limbs to give the illusion that she is making a giant devil. She isn't actually growing horns and wings. She's growing many hands that are woven together so expertly that you cannot tell the difference between them being a large amount of hands just clasped together or an actual devil, which is why this transformation is so impactful and scary, because she has now lived up to her namesake. She has now become the devil child. She has become a devil for her captain, embracing all the negatives that she has carried throughout her life, and is now wearing them proudly if it makes her captain's dream come true. Big character moment for Robin. However, what does this mean for the future? Based on what we've been seeing recently, she has not made a full body generation that's the size of a giant. Only limbs have been giant size. So it begs to reason that in the future, most likely in Elbaf, seeing as how we know that Saul is in Elbaf, which now makes Elbaf as much of a Robin arc than it is a Usopp arc, I think there she's going to have a body generation, a body blooming that's the size of a giant. Then moving on from that, I think she could get even bigger, perhaps having a body generation that's the size of an ancient giant, and onward and onward. I think this is going to reach a crescendo, it's going to reach a zenith once she is in a fight with the Blackbeard pirates. Her opponent now, looking at the events of 1087, might just be Avala Pizarro, because there's no other person on the Straw Hat Pirates that can, one, be in every location at once on an island, for example, and two, generate to become a size as big as an island. The only one who comes to mind is Luffy. And of course, Luffy isn't fighting Avala Pizarro. Avala Pizarro, no matter what happens in 1088 or onward, is sort of shaping up to be a main guy and a main threat. So he's going to have a main fight. And I think it only makes sense that Robin is that fight, that she gets to a point where her body generations are so big that she can literally break the back of an entire island. But with all that being said, give me your thoughts.